Picture this. You're a kid in the 1700s and you want a bedtime story. Something fun, something exciting, but instead of a story about a talking bunny or a mischievous cat in a hat, you get a stern voice reading, "In Adam's fall, we sinned all." And just like that, your bedtime is now a sermon. Welcome to children's literature before the 19th century, where books weren't just for fun, they were for discipline. Hey everyone, I'm Nick. This is DrCrankyPantsReads, and today we're diving into the early days of children's literature. Back when books weren't about sparking joy, but they were about sparking guilt and obedience, and occasionally absolute terror. Buckle up, because today we're talking about how kids' books started as moral instruction manuals before they became anything remotely entertaining. Before the 19th century, the concept of children's literature as we know it today didn't really exist. There were books for kids, sure, but they weren't about entertainment. They were about making sure you grew up into a reasonable, God-fearing adult. No nonsense, no fun, just moral education. Take the New England Primer, which was widely used in colonial America. This thing was the textbook for teaching kids how to read. But it wasn't just about the ABCs. It was about the ABCs plus a side of religious doctrine. So instead of A is for apple, you got A is for Adam's fall, we sinned all, which is a lot for a 5-year-old to take in. So before you even learned how to spell your own name, you were already learning about original sin. Fun times. So what exactly were kids reading? Let's break it down into 3 big categories: religious instruction, fables and folklore, and privilege. Religious instruction was the main focus of early children's books. It wasn't just about learning to read, it was about learning how to be morally upright. These books were packed with prayers, Bible stories, and very clear lessons about what happened if you stepped out of line. Think of it as the Scared Straight program, but in book form. You didn't just get a lesson, you got a warning. Basically, it was less, let's nurture young minds, and more, let's make sure these kids don't mess up their immortal souls before they hit puberty. Now, not everything kids heard was straight-up religious doctrine. Some of the earliest forms of children's literature were adapted from fables and folklore, stories that had been passed down for generations. But here's the thing, these stories, they weren't originally written for kids. Take Aesop's Fables, for example. Stories like The Tortoise and the Hare or The Boy Who Cried Wolf were meant to teach lessons, but they were just as relevant to adults as they were to kids. And then you had folktales like Little Red Riding Hood, which, before Disney got involved, usually ended with the wolf winning, as in eating the child. Yep. Early versions of that story didn't have a kindly woodsman coming in to save the day. Red Riding Hood got eaten, and the moral of the story was basically, stay out of the woods or you'll get eaten too. So yeah, bedtime stories, not super comforting back then. Now, let's talk about who actually had access to books. Because if you were a poor kid in the 1600s or 1700s, the odds of you owning a book were slim to none. Books were expensive, literacy wasn't widespread, and reading was mostly reserved for the wealthy. If you were working class, you were more likely to hear stories passed down orally than to actually own a book yourself. And even if you did have a book, it was probably something dry, didactic, and serious. There was no fun reading, no fantasy, no adventure, just instruction. Learning to read wasn't about enjoying stories. It was about making you a productive and obedient member of society. So let's recap. Before the 19th century, children's books weren't exactly page-turners. They were religious, they were moralizing, and meant to teach kids how to be good, not how to have fun. Most kids didn't even have books, and those who did, their book choices were pretty limited. a religious textbook, a fable where someone gets eaten, or a catechism with a quiz on sin at the end. Not exactly Harry Potter. But here's where I want to hear from you. Or if you're watching this for class, discuss these questions. Would you have wanted to read books like the New England Primer? Why or why not? Why do you think early children's literature focused so much on morality and obedience? Do you see moral lessons in modern children's books today? And if so, how have they changed? Next time, we're fast forwarding to the 19th century where books finally start getting fun. I'll see you then.